Post poll shows Mr. Obama up by 3. And here's where it gets really interesting. We get a ton of polling stuff every day now, right? And you can look at swing states, you can look at national numbers, you can look at trends. Every day, there's at least one super interesting and illuminating thing in the polling. And right now, the thing that is most important, I think most intriguing in the data, out of all the snapshots of the race you can do right now, is this. This right here is probably the most interesting thing. Look, it's when ABC News and Washington Post polled voters. They didn't just ask them who they like in terms of who they're going to vote for. They asked voters which candidate would be better on a series of issues. And here's what they found. On the issue of dealing with the economy, it's President Obama by 4. Dealing with taxes, President Obama by 5. Handling health care, Obama by 6. Handling international affairs, Obama by 10. Handling an unexpected major crisis, Obama by 12. Handling Medicare, Obama by 15. The only issue in the ABC News Washington Post poll where the president loses is this one. The issue of dealing with the deficit, where it is Mitt Romney holding a 3-point lead over President Obama. The president leading on every other issue except the deficit. Why is that the one issue in which Mitt Romney is seen as being better than President Obama? It's because of the thing that lost President Obama the first presidential debate 2 weeks ago, which was him trying to explain how Mitt Romney can't be trusted on the deficit by trying to do the math for everyone live on TV, saying something that sounded in translation essentially like, see, you have a very large number with $1 trillion in it, and then some smaller amalgamation of other trillions that when you add them up, they subtract them from the $5 trillion, and you get a number that's inappropriately negative or made positive. Do you follow me? President Obama, during that first debate, was trying to do the math over and over and over again as a way of explaining that what Mr. Romney is proposing economically would be a recipe for massive deficits. And really, there is no way mathematically that you can do the things Mr. Romney says he's going to do without running up massive deficits. But instead of making up punchy, memorable arguments that made him the more likable and effective of the two debaters, President Obama instead tried to prove that thing about the math. President Obama tried in that debate setting to explain what is so wrong with thinking that Mitt Romney is a guy who should be taken seriously on the deficit. He was trying to explain that without a whiteboard, without a soundtrack, without a narrative way to make it into a story that people would remember. He just listed these very large numbers over and over again, assuming that people could do the arithmetic and get the punchline. And Mitt Romney did not do that. Mitt Romney, instead of trying to rebut President Obama point by point, simply made the reasonable-sounding assertion that, well, never mind all your numbers. I've got 6 studies that back me up.
I will not, under any circumstances, raise taxes on middle-income families. I will lower taxes on middle-income families. Now, you cite a study. There's 6 other studies that looked at the study you described and say it's completely wrong.
I have 6 studies that say, actually, I'm great on the deficit issue. No worries. All this mumbo-jumbo giant number stuff you're getting from this president guy doesn't make any sense to me either. Look, here's a small number, 6. I've got 6 studies that say I'm fine. Those 6 studies, for the record, are not actually studies. 2 are blog posts by a conservative think tank. 1 is a report by a conservative think tank. 1 is a paper by a former George W. Bush advisor. And the 5th and 6th are a blog post and a Wall Street Journal op-ed by a Mitt Romney advisor. Calling those things studies is like calling me the homecoming queen. It's very flattering, but come on. Come on. The Romney campaign has been trying to wish away the math with this 6 studies magical incantation. They've been trying to use this 6 studies thing for so long that even the Sunday morning show on Fox is now calling bullpucky on it.
6 different studies have said this is entirely doable.
Very questionable. Some of them are blogs. Some of them are from the AEI, which is hardly an independent group. Those are not.
These are very credible sources, and
one of them is from a guy who is a blog from a guy who was a top advisor to George W. Bush. These are hardly nonpartisan studies.
See how Ed Gillespie doesn't look all that worried there? He's like waiting for the interviewer to stop talking, right? He's just kind of waiting. I'm just going to go back to my talking points as soon as you're done. There is a certain happy-go-luckiness by the Republicans when they are talking about this issue. They do not get too stressed out about this issue because they know that politically it really doesn't matter what they say. They trust that no matter what they are proposing and how it gets debunked or fact-checked or whatever, they know politically they will just seem like they're going to be good on the deficit, no matter what they propose. This is the most persistent myth in the modern politics of American money. This idea that Republican presidents in particular, are good on the deficit, when in fact the exact opposite is our modern history. On Friday, we learned, for example, that the U.S. budget deficit topped $1 trillion for the 4th year in a row. And while that is a ginormous number, here's the context for that. Here's our budget deficit in 2012, just over $1 trillion. And here's what it was last year. President Obama actually cut the deficit by more than $200 billion from the year before. Here's the budget deficit that President Obama was handed when he walked in the door. Your eyes are not deceiving you. You keep hearing the Republicans talk about how much President Obama has increased the deficit. President Obama has cut the deficit during his 4 years in office. The great Steve Bannon put this graph together at Maddow blog today, going through the raw data. And as Steve notes today, quote, over the last 4 decades, only 2 presidents have reduced the deficit this much, this quickly. And those 2 presidents are Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. Now, what do they have in common? Both Democrats. Historically, the Democratic Party has actually been the better of the 2 parties when it comes to the deficit. Over the last 40 years, it's Democratic presidents who have been the most fiscally responsible when it comes to the deficit. And it's Republican presidents who have been the most fiscally reckless. Somehow, in the face of this persistent history, Republicans have successfully cultivated this myth that they're the ones you should trust if you're worried about the debt and the deficit. And so even though voters trust Barack Obama on every other issue, they still, inexplicably, trust Mitt Romney more when it comes to the deficit. They have great faith in Mitt Romney's deficit hawkishness, even if all his 6 studies are just stuff written on a bathroom wall. And it's hilarious. I mean, it's factually hilarious, given that Mitt Romney really is proposing this in terms of what we spend on the military. You ready? These are our current levels of military spending, our biggest discretionary spending. That is what Mitt Romney is proposing to do to our biggest pile of discretionary spending. He is proposing adding $2 trillion extra dollars in spending just on the military, and he is proposing bringing in $5 trillion fewer dollars in revenue in order to pay for that. Barack Obama is right. The math does not work. The math might be boring, but the math does not work. This is like if you're living paycheck to paycheck right now, and you decide you're going to quit your job and then buy a new car at the same time. So you have less money coming in and lots more money going out. What does that make you? It makes you psyched because you got a new car and you don't have to work. Plenty of time to drive it around until it runs out of gas, and then what? But a decision like this, less money coming in, lots more money going out, a decision like that puts you in deep, deep, deep debt. And if you do that at the national level, you are a lot of things, but you are not good on the deficit. Except apparently people think that you're great on the deficit. And that distance in perception, distance between the perception and the reality of Mitt Romney is a political problem. If you are that bad on an issue like this, and people think you're great on the issue, that means something in our politics isn't working right. Someone is not doing their political job at making people understand the reality here and making you face the political consequences for it. Why is that? Obama campaign senior advisor Robert Gibbs joins us next.
Thank you for having me.
Am I blaming you unfairly for this political problem?
I was going to say, I think that was quite an intro, quite a setup. No, look, I do think, look, you make a series of great points. I mean, we forget that before Barack Obama ever walked into the Oval Office, President Bush had spent $1 trillion that year. And again, they want to blame. It's funny, you listen to them talk about it, and you forget that was all under their watch. And look, so many of the policies that we're trying to unwind right now, right? We ended the war in Afghanistan. We had to put some more troops in Afghanistan. Now we're in the process of bringing more of those troops home. The Bush tax cuts, a lot of things that we're having to continue to pay for that are really the result of horrible economic and policy decisions that were made 4 or 8 years ago.
So why does Mitt Romney get credit for being the guy would be better at handling the deficit? That's the thing that blows my mind, because I get the mathematical point that the president was trying to make in that first debate. $5 trillion tax cuts, $2 trillion in extra military spending, no way to spend it, no way to account for it. Right. That's a ton of red ink. I get that math. Nobody else broadly speaking, in the country is getting that math. People really think that the Republicans will be better on this. So what's the distance between what they're trying to do and what people believe about what they're trying to do?
Well, look, Rachel, I think this is one of the things that you mentioned the president mentioning in the debate. I think this is something you'll hear the president mention tomorrow. And I think it's something we have to talk about as a party and as the president's party every single day before this election, because you went through some of the math. You went through Ed Gillespie trying to go through the math. And, there's a $4.8 trillion tax cut that no study that actually looks at the real numbers can come up with a way for paying for without raising taxes on middle-class families. Add on to that $1 trillion in extending the Bush tax cuts for the upper end, $2 trillion for Pentagon spending, and that's how they want to start their deficit reduction conversation. I mean, this is all a big ruse for how do we cut taxes for the very upper end and hope that it trickles down for the middle class to lift all boats. It's never worked. It didn't work under George Bush. It won't work under Mitt Romney. We've got to do something much different. The president's plan to cut $4 trillion over 10 years in a balanced way, yet still have enough money to make the needed investments in things like education and infrastructure that we know will grow the economy.
This, at the risk of fighting with you about math, which I know is the world's most boring thing in the world, when you guys say it doesn't, what Mitt Romney is proposing doesn't work without raising taxes on the middle class. Mitt Romney's rejoinder to that is, I'm not going to raise taxes on the middle class. Right. And there's no way to fight about what he will or won't do unless you're speaking from the future. So the point is that it won't work to balance the budget without raising the taxes on the middle class. He can say that he's not going to do it, but what we know he's going to do is blow up the deficit Reagan-style.
Right.
And so why not make the argument on the basis of what he's going to do to the debt rather than asserting that he'll have to raise taxes on the middle class in order to get there?
Well, look, I think whichever way you do it, you understand that it doesn't add up. And the one thing I think, again, we've got to make sure people understand is, he will not enumerate the loopholes that he's going to close. He will not talk about the deductions and the extensions. But look, we know that the most credible study the Tax Policy Center did, if you take all the deductions and all the exclusions for the upper end, for the very wealthy, and you take all of those away, and then you add in that great dynamic scoring, which you're talking about, this magical elixir of if you cut taxes, you'll have this skyrocketing great economy.
The unicorns,
right?
All the productive
Exactly.
stuff, yeah.
Ask yourself as an American voter, did that happen when we cut taxes in a huge way twice in 2001 and 2003? The answer is no. Months and months and months of negative job growth right after the 2001 tax cut. But when you start doing all of that, when you take away all those deductions, the math still doesn't work. I mean,
you end up with a giant debt. But you're not making the argument to fiscally conservative voters about Mitt Romney equals giant debt.
Well, I think, if you watch the president, and I know certainly I do it when I talk about this, when you get to the fact that you can't fill a $4.8 trillion revenue hole in his tax cut, there's one of two things that has to happen, right? Either, as what we talk about a lot, those deductions are going to end up impacting middle-class families for things like their home mortgage. The other thing is you could end up, as you said, you could end up skyrocketing the debt just to pay for a tax cut for people that are as rich as Mitt Romney, who, as you know, Rachel, haven't had a bad day in this economy, right? They're not making decisions about whether or not to do certain things. They can still do everything they want to do. And look, you are right. It is they're either going to explode the deficit or they're going to raise taxes on middle-class families, none of which we know will do anything to provide any real growth in this economy. We're only going to do it if we build this economy from the middle out. If we make some of those important education investments, important investments in manufacturing, bring jobs back from overseas, sell more of our products overseas. If we do things like that, we can grow the economy.
I think that you will convince people, you will get rid of the Mitt Romney advantage on the issue of handling the deficit if you start talking about the Republican presidential record in modern history about running up the debt in a way that Democrats just never have. But what do I know? I'm just a TV person. Robert Gibbs, it is great to have you here. Thank you for taking time. I know it's as busy as it could possibly be for you. Thanks. All right. Actor